Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Fragomen FC Passport to North America 2026, Global Soccer and Immigration Podcast. I'm one of your three hosts, or amigos, as my colleague Sergio likes to call us. Sergio Flores in Mexico City, Jake Minster in Boston. And today we're turning the spotlight to the UK with a very special guest, our colleague Alex Hood, from our London office, Aston Villa supporter and immigration manager at Fragomen.
Alex, we're not going to hold Aston Villa against you, but you are in some great company with other supporters of Aston Villa. I will say the legendary Tom Wilson. That's why I'm an immigration attorney and not an actor. And the future King of England, His Majesty himself, Prince William. So some pretty big names and pretty big supporters there.
Yeah, thank you, guys. I'm going to struggle to compete with Hollywood's finest and the future king of our great country. But I'm certainly a dedicated Aston Villa fan, and believe me, you need to be given some of our struggles over the years. But we're in a good place now, and it's so great to be on the podcast with you guys. Talk all things UK football and immigration. And from my side, as you said, I'm a manager and solicitor in our London office where we focus on UK immigration, but I co-lead our sports immigration practice. So we help players coming into the UK, relocating here with all their immigration and visa requirements.
Super cool. Thanks, Alex. So let's just dive right in. The summer transfer window is in full spring, and once again, as usual, EPL clubs are really dominating that spending across Europe. But the UK's post-Brexit immigration rules have really changed how things and these signings are happening, right?
Yeah, absolutely, Jake. You're right that the EPL obviously consistently tops the spending charts across Europe, but the way English clubs approach transfers now is actually quite different to how they did just a few years ago. And that's really down to the UK's visa and immigration rules post-Brexit. So to briefly explain it, pre-Brexit, English teams could sign European players from across the continent. We had free movement across Europe. So these players didn't need a visa to play in the UK. They didn't need to meet any specific criteria. Post-Brexit, however, all overseas players now need to qualify for endorsement from the English FA to get a visa to play here. And without that endorsement, that player can't be signed. So what are the rules? So very simply, players need to score a sufficient number of points now based on a range of criteria in order to be endorsed. And these points are awarded based on the number of appearances a player makes for their national team, in their domestic league competitions, and in any other competitions such as Champions League, Europa League, etc. And these national leagues and competitions, they're ranked in terms of the points on offer. So if you're playing in the EPL, La Liga, etc., those leagues are at the top, so they offer the highest number of points, right down to sort of band 5 leagues. So Sweden, Chile, for example, those will have the lowest number of points. So it is a much more complex equation now for clubs when they're looking to sign international players. And as a result of not having easy access to all of the European market, we have seen English clubs start to look elsewhere for bargains. And a really great example of that, and I promise I've not just included this because it involves my team, is John Duran moving from Chicago Fire in the MLS to Aston Villa a few years ago. He moved for a really small amount. About 18 to 24 months later, he was sold for 71 million to Al Nassr in the Saudi Pro League. So I think it's really forced teams to be a bit more creative. And I think it's actually had quite a lot of benefits for the English league.
And we've recently seen how that played out with João Pedro joining Chelsea right before the Club World Cup. His U.S. visa processed just in time, and boom, scores twice against his boyhood club, Fluminense, and once against PSG in the final, helping Chelsea win the 2025 World Cup.
Right, Jake. Yeah, that was amazing. And thank you, Alex. That was very enlightening. So what's interesting is how clubs are casting a wider net now. You mentioned precisely John Duran from MLS to Aston Villa for £8.5 million, and he was sold just 18 months later for around 71 million. That's just crazy numbers. So are UK clubs looking farther afield now because of these rules?
Yeah, absolutely, Sergio. So initially there was some concern, I think concern from English clubs that they were going to suffer against other European teams who had unlimited access to European players. Um, so interestingly, and probably as a result of some conversations with English clubs, the UK government relaxed the immigration rules in the last 18 months to allow more overseas players to qualify for endorsement. So now clubs get a certain number of exemptions to sign players who don't meet the points criteria, but who score a reasonable number of points and can show exceptional talent. So who does that tend to be? Well, it tends to be younger players or those in less recognised leagues. And we've seen English clubs take advantage of this and look at players from leagues that they wouldn't normally have considered and particularly wouldn't have pre-Brexit. So it's a really topical, interesting point, and as Jake mentioned, the Club World Cup. Really interestingly, games in the Club World Cup now count towards the points calculation that you need to be endorsed for a visa to play in the UK. And the Club World Cup has actually been ranked in Band 2, so it has the same value of points as, for example, the Europa League, the Portuguese Primeira Liga, and it's actually above the MLS, for example, in terms of the points that it offers. So what we're seeing there is that's likely to boost the profile of players from clubs in South America, Africa, Asia, who played in the Club World Cup. And I think we are likely to see some more of those transfers from players in those leagues into the EPL soon.
It's fascinating. Let's pivot for a moment and talk about homegrown players. So the understanding we have is that, based on what you've been saying, there is more of an incentive now for teams to field English qualified, English-based talent. Maybe you can expand on that.
Yeah, there is, and this is something that the English FA really wanted to build into the transfer rules when they put them together post-Brexit to protect English talent and the English national team. So essentially, the current rules say that the more minutes a team gives to homegrown players, the more of the exemption slots that I mentioned to sign overseas players they will get. So there's a real incentive there for teams to play young English talent, as it also opens up the possibility for them to make more international transfers. So obviously we've got the World Cup next year, and I think this is going to play a part of it. It's a good example of immigration feeding into the sporting side of things. There's been a recent push to refresh England's squad, and I think we're likely to see breakthrough names like Adam Wharton, Miles Lewis-Skelly at Arsenal, who's a fantastic player, potentially other players who have not yet played for England, making late bids to replace some of the veterans who have been in Thomas Tuchel's initial squads like Jordan Henderson, Kyle Walker. And that's probably particularly important given Thomas Tuchel's slightly rocky start in charge. And I'm trying to be diplomatic by describing it in that way.
That's it's very, very polite to
Yeah.
describe it, Alex. Thank you. So beyond the visas and transfers, there's this growing concept of player care in the UK, in England, in English Premier League. Can you shed some light on what that actually means?
Yeah, so player care is a real differentiator here in the UK, and something that the English clubs and the EPL in particular does exceptionally well. So in the work that we do, when you hear about relocations of players, you will obviously hear about the transfer fee agreement, potentially the wages. You may hear about the visa as well in the news, but there's so much more to it. And we speak to a lot of organisations who specialise in player care. And what that essentially is it's everything from securing a residence for the player and their families, making sure their kids can go to school, introducing them to a network here, ensuring they've got adequate financial planning advice, because obviously a football career is so short and you need to maximize your earnings. So that's obviously vital anywhere in the world where you've got players moving, but the UK is really leading the way in terms of this offering. And I know that clubs have their own in-house player care specialists whose kind of sole job is to ensure that player has everything they need off the pitch in place. They don't have to worry about that, so they can perform well on it. And yeah, it's something we've seen English clubs kind of try and use to retain talent in the EPL. They're obviously competing now against leagues like Saudi Arabia, trying to lure players with big offers. But those leagues may not have the many years of experience in terms of providing that off-field support that the EPL and English clubs have.
Quite interesting. So that's like the whole package, Alex. I think that that's a great idea. And before we wrap up, I would like to know your take, Alex, on what's happening on the women's football front.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a topic that's close to my heart. Since 2020, I've been coaching women's football at a grassroots girls football charity, and the game is growing so quickly. We've got the Women's Euros taking place right now. England are obviously the holders and going well again in this tournament. But what we are seeing in general is more international transfers into the Women's Super League in England. And it's really starting to establish itself as a top destination, challenging the US NWSL's domination. So as English teams continue to compete across Europe, immigration is going to play such a key role in their ability to challenge the leading established teams like Barcelona, Real Madrid. It's a lot of player movement, international player movement, obviously in the men's game. The women's game, not so much, but it has caught up in the last few years. And a great example of that is the Women's Champions League final just this year. Arsenal beat Barcelona 1-0 to win the tournament. And the winning goal was scored by Swedish forward Stina Blackstenius, who was signed by Arsenal in 2022. So that's a really great example of how immigration is really impacting the women's game in a similar way as it has to the men's.
Yeah, on the Canada side, if I could add, in fact, big news reports, a Canadian woman signed by Arsenal for over $1 million, which made big news here in Canada. The largest signing for a Canadian female ever. And when we speak about holders, our Canadian women are Olympic gold medalists. So there you go.
They also like to fly drones over other practice fields. Sorry, Rick. Just kidding.
Very bold stuff there, Jake, but that's okay.
Quick fire, Alex. Before we do wrap up here, what are your predictions on Aston Villa this season?
So I think Villa will be a season of consolidation. We just missed out on the Champions League last year. Devastating final day, lost to Manchester United. So I think top 7 with a hopefully glorious Europa League run.
And on that point, typically we end our episodes with our guests where I, unfortunately, am not in my home office, so I cannot grab my replica World Cup trophy, but I will just ask the question, or questions in this case. We'll ask our guests, who do you think will be taking home that World Cup trophy? And if it is a different response, who do you want to win? I think we know the answer to this one, but I'll ask the question anyway. Who would you like, and who do you think?
Yeah. So left field, I'm going to say the Netherlands. We've got a lot of exciting young talent. Who do I want to win? I have to say England, right? I think we've got a cunning plan to lose some games now. People will write us off, and then we come roaring back next year to end 60 years of hurt. I think it is now. We've got to update the song.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's coming home. Hey, listen, European clubs historically haven't done that great when the World Cup is outside Europe. Obviously, that changed when Spain won in South Africa. So we'll see if that continues. Thank you very much, Alex, for your time, for your expertise, for your insights. I think they were very valuable for our listeners and viewers. And for everyone listening and watching, please stay tuned. We're going to have a summer roundup episode before the summer is out. FIFA Club World Cup, CONCACAF Gold Cup, Women's Euro, and a roundup of the World Cup qualifying at that time. So thank you everyone for joining us. Please stay tuned. Hashtag Fragomen FC to join the conversation, and we'll see you in a little bit.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Alex.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Alex.
Thanks, Alex.
Bye.
Bye.